before. Okay, I got a no. I got another no in chat. No, okay. No, no, okay. That's fine. Does anyone have any family that's worked in the industry? Okay, I got a couple no's on that also. Okay, that's fine. So let me talk to you. I'm a pharmacist, and I graduated from Mass College of Pharmacy a number of years ago. And I've spent 34 years working in the pharmaceutical industry. But let me see if I get my slides up. And then I want to show you, I got a couple pictures I'll show you. And this will be informal. Hopefully you'll learn a little bit about what's in the industry and some of the opportunities for pharmacists in particular for the industry. So if I get this guy. Okay. So Courtney, can you see my slides okay? Perfect. Okay, good. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the industry. First, a little introduction on me. I'm from Webster, Massachusetts, of all places, which is great. And I joined the industry right after I left pharmacy school. And you can see from this kind of chronology here, up at the top of the first jobs and then the bottom of the last jobs. So I worked for three primarily really big pharmaceutical companies. I worked for Eli Lilly, Johnson & Johnson, and AstraZeneca. And those three companies alone are probably about 30 some odd years of the 34 years. I've also worked for some other companies, some small biotech companies, which helped to kind of round out those different experiences that I've had, which I thought were good. I've also got, in addition to being a pharmacist, I have an MBA that I got from Bryant University. I did that while I was working for Lilly. I did it at night. Okay. And then probably about 10 years ago, I left the industry and I joined academia, schools of pharmacy. So I worked at Mass College of Pharmacy in Boston for about 6 years. And I've been at KGI here, the Keck Graduate Institute School of Pharmacy, probably for close to the last 3.5 years. So I like the background because it kind of gives you a feel for the industry, but also working in academia, which tells me that people can work in multiple places, based upon just having a pharmacy license. I also spent some time working as a pharmacist when I first got out of pharmacy school. And so I think we have very transferable skills. So just a couple of questions of, what do you guys know about the pharmaceutical industry itself? And I mean, I know it's been in the headlines all the time because of the viruses and the vaccines. So what do you guys know about the biopharmaceutical industry? And you can put it in the chat if you want. Where's my chat? For some reason, my chat's invisible to me right now. It's high. So Courtney, anything that you have in the chat right now?
I don't see anything yet.
Okay.
Any takers? No. Oh, a lot of regulations on products from Charles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. We have to be very heavily regulated because people's lives depend on it. So I think that's what's important. So we make sure we have that. So let's see if I can look at this. What else do you know about lots of regulation? What else do you guys know about the industry? What's your opinion? In fact, think about right now, we're facing the pandemic. And on top of that pandemic, one of the things that's going to get us out of the pandemic is the industry, because based upon the vaccines that we have. And, and it's hard because not all vaccines that come out are perfect when they first come out. They usually take years of testing, but people are very impatient. We don't have a lot of time right now. So what we have right now is we have vaccines that are coming out very, very quickly under emergency authorization from the FDA. Okay. And then one of the things that people have, so what's our expectations? And people expect the industry to come out with cures, and that's part of what the expectation that people have, because the industry has been so good for so long at delivering those things. Okay. So I have my chat up now, but let's go on to the next slide. And I want to kind of give you a little bit of a story about what our perceptions are. And then of course, we'll talk a little bit more about expectations for the industry. And so when people think about cures and taking care of patients, they think about this. This was from Leonardo da Vinci. And he talks about this is what a man should look like, okay, what humans should look like. And we think about the physicality of what that is. But in reality today, it's about genes. It's about what our genes are doing and how they're driving. I was on a call this morning with two pharmacists that are working in pharmacogenomics and think that everybody should have a pharmacogenomic test. And that would tell you how they would react to different drugs, whether they would, essentially the drug would work or wouldn't work. whether it be an under-responder or an over-responder, if you will. And that would save a lot of time, money, and effort if I knew that information before we prescribe the drug to you, because we know whether or not the medication would essentially be handled by the body in the correct fashion. Okay, so if we think about it, today is really moving on. Our genetic code is driving a lot of the decisions, and as you know, there are a number of products that are coming out for people to be handled gene therapies. There's probably about a half a dozen in the marketplace today, and by the end of the decade, there'll probably about 30 more. Okay, so this is miraculous because of what they're able to do and the cures they've been able to give for patients. Okay, as we think about the journey and self-improvement, we think about this through innovation, in the lens of innovation. So we'll talk about that right now because I want you to have a good feel for the industry's drive, what drives the industry, and how we kind of get everything done. So if you think about it as the innovation and the innovation engine that goes on, let's talk about the 6 basic steps in order to get a new medical solution, if you will, or a new medical product. So the first thing, of course, is the best thing is to start with a problem. So what's an unmet medical need? And so if I was to ask you, are there any diseases in the United States right now that are not well controlled? What would you say? Absolutely, the coronavirus, right? Heart disease, one of the biggest ones. What else? What else is not well controlled? Cancer, perfect. Yes, you're picking the big ones right now. What about bipolar disease? What about diabetes? I mean, diabetes, we have a lot of treatments, but do we have a cure for diabetes? And one of the big ones is Alzheimer's disease, which has a huge impact on elderly people, if you will. So if you think about it, there's a number of diseases that we have today in the United States where there's a significant unmet medical need. If we let's talk about the top 3, and I think you guys have nailed the top ones right here. So if we talk about the number 1 is heart disease. And every year in the United States, we have over 600,000 deaths that are attributed to heart disease. With cancer, it's almost 600,000. Right? Now, this year, by the way, and thank you for picking out coronavirus, how many deaths do we think we're going to see? Well, we know over the past year, we've had about 550,000 deaths, which tells us that if indeed this was to continue on an annual basis, this would be the 3rd largest cause of deaths in the United States, the coronavirus. Now, fingers crossed, we're learning as a society how to handle this better, but we're also learning there are different types of drug and drug therapies. Yes, there are the vaccines that are out, but also companies like Lilly and Regeneron are coming out with monoclonal antibodies. And monoclonal antibodies are what President Trump had, former President Trump had when he got the coronavirus. And so this is another way of handling it. So, what you'd like to do is have everybody have the vaccinations. And for people that don't want to, maybe they get treated with these monoclonal antibodies. And so that's another way of doing it. So hopefully a year from now, we're not seeing as many deaths from the coronavirus. And so number 3 would be chronic lung disease. But if you notice, we moved down from, with cancer, about 600,000. The number 3 is all the way down to 155,000. So those are the top 3 diseases that we have. So they all have significant unmet medical need. So that's number 1. First, find an unmet medical need. And then the second thing, you have to understand the drug development process. And then understand that is the scientific process that we have to make sure that we're following all the regulations, but on top of that, being innovative. So I put 2 different pictures up here. One of those is willow bark. And I don't know if you know or not, but willow bark was the original aspirin. So, and by the way, the original, the early ancestors, if you will, were people that took nature and they would find different types of products that they would take and they would essentially relieve headaches, or you could use for if someone got a burn. There's just different things that we did. Yucca plant is very good for that. And so that was a long time ago. And if I put on the other side something here, this is Luxturna. Luxturna is a gene therapy which works for people with inherited blindness. And so there was a recent episode on 60 Minutes that had this drug being tried by a 12-year-old boy, and he had this inherited blindness. When he was born, he was fine, 20/20 vision, but over time, he started losing his vision. And he got to the point where he could hardly even see anymore. And at 12 years old, he received an injection of this gene therapy, and his vision returned to 2020. So pretty remarkable when you think about using gene therapy. And this is part of understanding the drug development process on fixing or curing these different types of unmet medical need. Okay. One thing, I always love this slide because whether you're doing a pharmaceutical product or you're doing a diagnostic product, you're doing any other product that is approved by the FDA, it goes through the same process. First, you come out with whatever the discovery is, whether it's a new enzyme, a biological. Then you take and you have to find out, get to the best one of those, if you will, the best type, and put that into preclinical studies. Then you actually come out with one or two from the preclinical trials that has the best profile. And then you take and you put that into clinical trials. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, increasing complexity, increased number of patients, and you know whether or not this drug is going to make it. You know it, you have safety points all along the way in phase 1, whether or not this is going to work well, phase 2, phase 3, et cetera. Then, of course, once it's submitted to the FDA, like we've just had with these new products, these new vaccines, they're going to approve it. And then, of course, it goes to the marketplace. So this is replicated thousands and thousands of times by all the different companies that are looking for FDA approval. So yes, we use it for pharmaceuticals, but it's also used for those other products also. So the third point of the 6 points is, do you have a winning strategy? I mean, pharmaceutical companies, for the most part, are for-profit organizations. From the smallest biotech company where they may have a half a dozen employees to a large company like Johnson & Johnson where they have 150,000 employees. But they have to have essentially a winning strategy on how it goes from an idea, that innovation, to the marketplace. And I just have one slide on this, which kind of gives you the 3 different dimensions of how to have a business strategy in order to make a product, medical product, via pharmaceutical. The first thing is, what's it worth? What's it worth in the marketplace? These are for-profit companies. And so they have to make a product because no one else is going to do it. The government can't afford to do it because people won't want to pay that kind of money to have the companies, essentially the government, lose a lot of money before we have a successful product. Excuse me. So how valuable, and you have to estimate what the value is of a new antibiotic, of a new vaccine. So there has to be a return on the investment. So once you have a good idea what the value of this and how it will help patients out, the second thing, is it real? Is it doable? Do we have the technological feasibility to make that happen? 10 years ago, we did not have the technologically feasibility to come out with mRNA, essentially the vaccines from Moderna and Pfizer today. 10 years ago, we did not have the technological feasibility to come out with gene therapy, but we have those today. So that's the second thing. Do we have the technological feasibility to make this happen? And the last thing is, do we have the competency to win? Do you have the scientists? Do you have the management? Do you have the financing, if you will, in order to actually make this happen and be able to bring this product to marketplace and make it successful? So again, when you're looking at a product, one of the stages is, what's the business strategy for making this happen? And all the companies have to go through these things. Okay. The next one, obviously, is you're doing the R&D. You're doing the research and development to make it happen. Here's a slide with lots and lots of buzzwords, if you want. There's about investment and industry. You're talking about the different types of technology. And the federal government is actually in the United States, and you as taxpayers are helping out with this because we fund through the NIH, we fund billions of dollars worth of early research. And that early research looks at different pathways for what diseases are doing or what the body is doing. And so through this, we take in these discoveries that we have, we then try to apply these new discoveries to a product or products in order to affect or change what the disease process is. Okay, so that's it. Then, of course, once you've done all that work, then we go over to our friends at the FDA or the European Medicines Agency to get approval. And they are really our friends. They are the friends of the industry because they're the ones who are the guardians of, is it safe and is it efficacious as used in this manner? I don't know if you've ever seen an FDA meeting, but you can. The FDA is so transparent when they're looking at different drugs. They actually have a public hearing. It's in a big hotel in Baltimore, outside of Washington, D.C., actually. And what they do is they even televise them because the FDA wants it to be transparent that we looked at all this information, we looked at what the company said, we did our own independent analysis, and then we came out with a decision. And we have advisors that actually work with the FDA, people that are knowledgeable about what's going on. And so right now there's a problem with the J&J vaccine. The problem is we're seeing a very small minority out of the 6.8 million doses that have been given in the United States. We've seen 6 people that have had like a thrombosis because of that. Now, the question is, do those people also have an autoimmune disease? And should we have known that earlier? So that they're going to put a pause on the vaccine until they really study this to see whether this is causative to the vaccine, or whether this is just a happenstance that you would have this many people would have a problem if you took a population of 6.8 million people. And they tend to be older adults, so that actually adds to the complexity of it. Okay, so we take it to our friends at the FDA, and then if they approve it, then we commercialize it. So we hand it off from the researchers to the commercial people who go in the marketplace and say, okay, here's something new. It has value to it. It works right for, we all call it the rights. It's the right drug for the right patient at the right time for the right condition. Okay, and that's the way we promote it. And it's the ethical way of promoting pharmaceuticals or medical devices or diagnostics. In doing that, there's also this time crunch on making this happen. You won't be able to read this whole slide, but in marketing and in pharmaceutical marketing, we have, what's the product, where's it being sold, how much is it going to cost, what's the promotion? And there's also the underlying part of this is obviously a physical environment and a process, but the most important element in this whole product commercialization is people. Having the right people that have the right knowledge in order to promote the drug in the right place. Okay? And there's some things that we'll look at right now. This is our chart about adoption curves. And then one of the reasons in pharmaceuticals for-profit companies is that the minute they launch the product, they know when the patent is going to expire. So during that time period that you have to make enough money to pay back all it's actually not millions, actually several $billion in order to pay this back so that you can generate enough income to keep the company going. Okay. And so what they're trying to do with all the marketing and the TV ads and everything else is to get the innovators and the early adopters to try the product and see how it works. And if it works well, then essentially it'll move on to the early majority. Now, normally it would take a long time to go from this innovation to early adopters to early majority to late majority. But with the corona vaccines, it's happening very, very fast. It's happening because we don't have time to wait. Because every day that we wait, we have new variants that are essentially are appearing because it's the natural evolution of these viruses. Okay, so one thing that we worry about and take care of is that we want to make sure that we're doing the most that we can to responsibly promote, so you find out how well the product works once it's passed through the FDA. Okay, and then some individual competencies. One of the things we look about saying, well, geez, that's something that I would like to do. And it's a tough question because you may not know yet. This is just one possible pathway for someone who's interested in working in science and math and wants to work in the industry. And of course, for me, I have a bias as being a pharmacist, recognizing that pharmacists have a lot to do with the industry. So the question you have to ask yourself is, what do you have to do to get a seat at the table? And here's the table right here. These are scientists or business people saying, okay, how are we going to be able to commercialize or share the value of this medicine, the information about it, and also share what the risks are, because everything has risk. We know that we've seen risk with the J&J vaccine, but of the 6.8 million people who have taken it, most of those patients are getting a good response rate. So nothing is perfect, if you will. The J&J vaccine is doing well, but we're also doing quite well for essentially the other vaccines that are out there, Moderna and Pfizer vaccines. So one of the things I just want to show you is about competencies. Within the industry, there are a group of individuals that work between research and development and between the commercialization. We call them medical affairs personnel. And the medical affairs personnel are the ones that kind of translate the findings from the clinical trials into okay, is this safe and efficacious, right? And so they have to have certain competencies. And I think this is really actually quite a clever way of helping people understand whether or not you have the right kind of competencies to work in this particular part of the pharmaceutical industry. And so this right here is an individual competency model. I spent about 2 years working for a group called the Hay Group And the Hay Group is a human resource consultancy. And we would look at this very seriously because, I would ask, that if you want to go to your employer, they're trying to make sure that you're going to not only be an effective employee, but also very happy doing what you're doing. And that depends on whether or not you have the competencies to make essentially a job out of this. And so if you look at these in the second group down, it's medical affairs core competencies. And it's about leadership and strategy. So are you good at being a leader? Are you good at helping out with strategy? If you look at the next couple of boxes on the second line, it's are you good with data? Are you good at science and math? Are you good at generating data by doing a clinical trial? And then are you good at disseminating that, which means it's about medical writing, okay? And then the last thing is about knowledge management and being a part of the medical community. Not saying that you have to have every single competency here, but if you want to work in medical affairs, you can have some of these competencies so that you can take and work with some of your colleagues in order to produce good scientific information that people can find actionable. Okay. The other thing is that, and hopefully, do you guys know what this is? You can put it in the chat. What is this creature? It's an iguana. It's a chameleon, right? So it's a chameleon. So thank you for that one, Edmund. So this is a creature that has to change its colors and modify itself to protect itself or to hunt in the right way, depending upon its environment. And the reason I put this in here is because I want you to recognize that within the pharmaceutical industry, the industry is always changing. It's always responding because we've come up with new drugs and they work well. Then the question is, okay, so we have to go on to the next thing. So what's the next unmet medical need that's out there that we can use our scientific acumen in order to look for? Okay, so I know that when I started off in the industry, I used to work for Eli Lilly and Company, and we were primarily one of the world's biggest antibiotic companies. We didn't do that much in central nervous system. But as the company grew, it actually went into the area of CNS. And then we, of course, launched Prozac, which is a pretty good example of being able to treat clinical depression in the right way. From Prozac, there became some other drugs that came out of that, which were more to treat bipolar disease or other CNS diseases. So the company kind of morphed, if you will, from an antibiotic powerhouse when I joined them to 10 or 15 years later, they're a CNS, a central nervous system powerhouse kind of company. So the companies are always changing based upon what they discover and essentially what they can produce for the marketplace. Okay. So if you think about it, again, getting a little bit oriented to PharmDs, where they work in organizations, there are the traditional jobs, obviously, which are great jobs to have, working in community pharmacy, but there's also jobs working in hospitals. And those jobs are also changing to fit the market need. And these are just within the pharmaceutical, non-traditional jobs, if you will. You can work in biotechnology companies or pharmaceutical companies. There's medical device and diagnostic companies. There's contract research organizations, which is all about looking clinical trials. The next line is on sales organizations or medical organizations. There are tons of places for a pharmacist to work at in the industry. And you can be very entrepreneurial and you can work in these companies quite well. Now, just let me show you what some of the companies look like. These are some of the companies you'll probably recognize. Obviously, Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer, Amgen, Becton Dixon. I've also put some consulting companies in here, which I think is good. This company, one of my former students now working as a consultant in 1798, which is a consulting company for the industry. Moderna, which you'll recognize their name, obviously, because of what's going on. Allergan and AbbVie. So these are just a few of the companies that are out in the marketplace today that are making significant investment into research and development so they can take and they can produce good products. I also want to leave you with one last slide before we just open this up for questions, if there are any. And that's it, that it's global research and global discovery. It's too expensive today to just develop a drug just for the United States or just develop for England, for example. Because of the investment companies have to make, the drugs are appropriate to be used around the world. Okay? So when someone's working in the United States, they may be working in an area of innovation, but it may be working for a drug that would be used, for example, in Africa or maybe Europe, or Asia. So again, these companies are all looking for for either because they have enough people to work around the world, or they're working with partners to make sure their products are used around the world. Okay. So that's it. Let me stop sharing so we can see each other and just see what kind of questions you might have for me. Let's pull this over here. So talk to me. Tell me what is it that you think now that you've seen this? What kind of questions do you have? You're right. So Charles asked a question when you say PharmD, it's a doctorate in pharmacy as opposed to like a Master of Science in Pharmaceuticals. And of course, a Master of Science in Pharmaceuticals can work in the industry. They would normally work on the earlier stages of research and development. In the United States today, we require people to have a doctorate in order to get licensed to practice as a pharmacist. So there's different variations. You can have, some schools have what's called a 0 to 6 school. So you come out of high school and you go right into pharmacy school, and you spend 2 pre-professional and then 4 professional years. There are other schools like the one I work for at Tech, which we can take students that have had 2 years, but most students actually graduate with a bachelor's degree in science, and then they come in for 4 years of professional training to get their doctorate in pharmacy, and that helps out. So that's the norm right now today. Okay, other questions? So the answer to the question, is it portable enough so you can go into the industry? The answer is absolutely yes. So I also run, in addition to working experiential education, which is about helping pharmacy students find placement as they're being educated, like in pharmacies, community pharmacies, and also in hospitals. You go one step beyond it. We also help people to get essentially fellowship in industry. When people graduate from pharmacy school, sometimes they go into a residency if they want to work in a hospital. It's additional specialization, or they can get a fellowship. And so fellowships are a 1 or 2 year experience after you've graduated and have your PharmD, and it helps you with your specialization of where you want to work in the industry. Now, right now, there are about 620 PharmD fellowships that are available in the United States. And when you think about it, so that's people that are finished, they've got their PharmD, and then they spend a year or 2 years and get further specialization. There's also, in last year, the class of 2020, we found out that there were 208 students who graduated that didn't get a fellowship, didn't do a residency, but went directly into the industry. So to answer your question, Charles, yes, you can go directly into the industry as soon as you have your PharmD degree. Okay. Anyone wants to know, would you consider being a pharm tech as the best way to get started to your profession, or at least to get experience? And the answer is absolutely yes. Any job where you're essentially exposed to where the patient is gives you lots and lots of information about what's going on. So as you know, when a patient comes and see you, sometimes they're not happy campers. Well, that's because they're not feeling well, and they're looking for the pharmacist and the pharmacy tech and the pharmacy intern to help them get that medicine and the information on the best way to use it, either for themselves or a member of their family. And as you know, this happens millions of times every single year. But by being a pharmacy tech and working in a CVS or a Walgreens or Rite Aid or an independent, that gives you lots of information about what that transaction is like and what a pharmacist has to know in order to be a competent caring pharmacist for the patients. They have to know an awful lot. They have to get along really well with doctors. They have to know about insurance companies. They have to know about vaccinations, all those types of things. And that's the training that pharmacists receive in order to be given that license to be able to practice. But the closer you can get to knowing what happens, that transaction, it kind of takes a little bit of the mystique away from it, if you will. Other folks have worked as pharmacy techs or infusion techs within essentially a hospital. And then they have lots of good information then of what it's like to be a hospital pharmacist. It's a different type of job. And I think that's any experience that you have in and around pharmacy helps to inform you as to what kind of career you'd like to have within pharmacy. And one of the things I like about the Keck Graduate Institute is that we want, I really don't care where you work in pharmacy. You can work in community, hospital, the industry, you can work in long-term care. You can work, there's so many different places that you can work, but my job as a faculty member is to make sure that we fully educate you with wherever you want to go. And we do that by either by what different faculty already know from their prior jobs, or we'll bring in experts. So we have each week we have between 1 and 2 people that come into the school that are working at different parts of the industry or medical health or life sciences professions, and they help to educate people on what's happening with their job and what their journey has been. And it gives you a little snippet of information into where you could practice if you became a pharmacist, or for example, as you mentioned, so if you had a master's degree in pharmaceuticals or a PhD, there are different places where your expertise would lend you to doing a good job in those areas. Okay, more questions? Okay, I think we're questioned out, or people have gone to dinner, one or the other, which is fine. Courtney, how would you like to, I'd be happy to answer any other questions you guys have. Do you want to share my email address, my school email address?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
You're
So,
welcome.
appreciate it. So there's one other thing. When I was back in Boston at the pharmacy school, we also had a number of other professions, if you will. We had nurses, we had nurse practitioners, we had a dental school, we had something else. We had physicians assistants. We also had people who were occupational therapists. So a number of them. And so I was working with one of the undergrads, and she wanted to do a research. She had a fundamental question. She wanted to know, what was it that attracted all these different people to come to the school to get their degree or their license in order to practice? And it was interesting because we had 7,000 people at the school. And so she actually did a survey of over 700 students from all across the school at uh, all different years, if you will, and all across all the different specialities. And from those 700, there came to be a common theme. And some people thought it was maybe it's money, maybe it's whatever it might be. And she said the common thing was that the students were good in math and science, and they wanted to help people. That was it, resounding. They wanted to help people, and they knew that they were good in math and science. So it actually worked out really well. So if you're good in math and science, and you want to help people, this is one of the professions where people find it really resonates with essentially what their personality is, and how they want to express themselves through a career. So I just thought I'd share that because I thought that was an interesting finding. And I don't think she's ever published that information. So there's only a handful of us that have that stuff. So I know she was working on it, but then she went on to get a couple more degrees after that. So, okay. Okay, any final questions, guys? Okay, Charles, thank you so much. Caitlin, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Again, any questions, you can contact Courtney. They can get a hold of me, and I'll be happy to answer any other questions you may have, or I'll give you any other point you in the direction of anyone else that can answer questions that I haven't.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tyrell and everyone. Feel free to take down our email addresses, and like Dr. Tyrell said, reach out anytime for any information you need.
Fantastic.
Otherwise, have a good rest of your evenings.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Courtney, thank you so much for moderating. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Okay, I look forward to seeing you on campus soon, okay?
Yes, hopefully soon. Have a good rest of your night.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.